Good afternoon. Well, welcome to the final Fuel the Fire lecture series, but we are very confident, based upon the energy in this room, that it's not going to be the last time we're together to talk about our community and how we're going to continue to move it forward and to see advancement. But we do appreciate you being here this afternoon for Brad Segal, who's going to be speaking to us in a few moments. Before we start, though, one of the things I want to make sure we do today is that as you walk into the space, you see the technology before you. You see literally the flames on the wall. Our staff at our office, WDDC, the Chamber, the Community Foundation, they have been working tirelessly to put these things together. So I don't want to leave someone out, but I just want you to know that we appreciate the staff. I know that hopefully I won't forget anyone, but Jamie, Jason, and Nancy with our group, Angie, Renee, Susie, Courtney with the Chamber, and then with the Community Foundation, Shelley, Courtney, again, Carol, and also Jason, all just working tirelessly to make this happen. So I want to give them all a round of applause. What we've been doing the past several series here now is actually been made possible through the Knight Foundation. And the Knight Foundation is a tremendous partner. We're very fortunate that we're one of the 26 cities that they continue to invest in. Through our Community Foundation, we have that connection to that foundation, and they've done an unbelievable amount of work in our community, continue to do that, and we'll be doing more, I know, in the days and months and years ahead. So we want to thank the Knight Foundation for their help in making sure we have this today. Our organizations, the WDDC, the Chamber, the Community Foundation, the Leadership Council, have all come together also to help make this event. Today's keynote, actually, we have some additional partners that are working with us to make it possible. Layhem Development, GLMV Architecture, Cargill, Height, Fanning, and Honeyman, and the law offices of Morris, Lang, Evans, Brock, and Kennedy. All these individuals have helped us in some form or fashion to make sure that we could do this today. So I'd like to give them a round of applause as well. Have you not enjoyed being at the Lux? I mean, the energy is just tremendous. And so I know Dr. Eister and Michael are here somewhere. There's Dr. Eister over here to my left. I don't know where Michael is. He's around here. He's probably in the back. No, he is. He's back there in the back. Gentlemen, thank you for your generosity. These gentlemen have not charged us to be here. They have actually spent money for us to be here. So again, thank you to you two gentlemen for not only putting this on. Yeah, let's go and give them a round of applause. But we do want to thank you for your vision. We see it coming to fruition in so many of your projects, and we look forward to seeing the next project that we know you all will be working on very soon. And so thank you again for what you're doing. Also, it was fun in that Star Lumber called and said, you know, we love what's going on with the Fuel the Fire series, and we want to give food to the next one. So Alan, I don't know where you are, sir. It's hard to see. There he is, right in the back. Alan, thank you so much for Star Lumber underwriting the food. And then also, I know Far Hall Construction, I can tell you they've been working tirelessly along with Kent AV. So those two groups we want to give applause to as well. I know we have some elected officials here. I know that Councilman Meissner is here, and right here to my right, and then also Councilman Miller. Woman Miller, they're right here in the front. So thank you. Is there any other elected officials that have come in that I just didn't see? If you raise your hand, okay. Thank you for being here. We appreciate your leadership. I know you all have been at all of these, and we appreciate you all being actively engaged in what's going on in our downtown, but also our city as a whole. The other groups I want to mention is that I have the fortune of being able to work for a group of board of directors that's fantastic in that they're not small on vision. They get out there and really challenge us to continue to raise the bar to what we want to do next in our downtown. So members of the WDC board, if you'd raise your hand, I know there's several of you here up front, middle, and the back. Just want to give you all an applause. Thank you for being here and your support. The Community Foundation, again, a huge part of what's going on. So board members of the Community Foundation, I know Shelley is up here as their CEO. Other members, I see some here in the front. Again, let's give them a hand of applause too as well. And then the chamber and working with the Leadership Council. I know I've seen Gary Plummer here. Other members of the Chamber Board of Directors and Gary in the back, if you'd raise your hand, we certainly want to give you appreciation as well. So thank you for that. As we have done in the other lectures, is that social media will be running today. And so on the screens, you will actually see tweets that are coming out from you in the audience. We encourage you to do that. It's important for those who are both here and then those who are not to know what's going on in their downtown and the discussion that's underway. So we encourage you to do that. You can also use hashtag #FuelTheFireICT. My wife laughs when I start talking about hashtags, so she knows how technically advanced I am. So I try to impress her, but it doesn't work quite so well. So anyway, hashtag #FuelTheFireICT. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Downtown Wichita, at Wichita CF, and also Venture Boldly on both, again, Facebook and Twitter. You know, again, this has been a tremendous event. In fact, when I was talking to Shelley Pryor and Gary, we're kind of sad that this is the last Fuel the Fire lecture. We're really having fun with it. And I hope you have as well. Because, again, the point of this is to elevate the conversation. There's some great things happening in our city, in our region, but it takes you. We cannot do it just through our organizations. I know that the political leadership in this room will say it's important that you're actively engaged in what's happening. So we appreciate the time that you've taken to be here in the audience. The other thing we want to make sure you know is that we are taping each of these lectures. So you can actually go to Fuel the Fire website and see these again. You can actually send them, forward them on out to other people that have not been able to be here. And we really encourage you to do that. But as I said earlier, the conversation is not going to end here. Today, you're going to hear from Brad Segal. Brad is an individual. He lives in Denver. And just as we've heard with Carol, there's a thread that runs through what you've been hearing, the messages. Carol Collada came in, and as you know, she really talked about the quality of opportunity, place, and the talent. How do we really maximize those opportunities? How do we maximize those resources? James Chung came in, and who is from Wichita, Reach Advisors, and gave us a really, I think, kind of a wake-up call on what is happening in our community, what's happening around us, what's happening in the region, what's happening in North America. Today, Brad's going to talk to you about the demographics, what's happening, the trends. You know, this information really creates the opportunity for us to make wise decisions. I think you're going to be amazed with what he has to tell you. I met Brad several years ago through IDA. IDA is our professional affiliation, if you will, of downtown development corporations globally. Brad has been involved with downtown development for about 30 years now. And so he has a wealth of information of seeing how downtowns have evolved, if you will, over the last few decades and where we're going as opportunities. Brad's firm, Puma, Professional Urban Management Associates, has done work in 35 states, over 150 cities, and they've really worked as economists, but they've also worked to help shape development corporations to be effective in fulfilling the mission of that downtown. And today, actually, it's a homecoming. Brad was here a little over 10 years ago to help create the Downtown Development Corporation, the SMID. So if you like us, you'll applaud Brad. If you don't, then you know who to blame. But hopefully the list is long, Brad, on who they like what's going on. But Brad, we have been with Brad since 7:30 this morning in meetings, and we want to really exhaust all the knowledge we can out of him about what's going on. But if you would, let's give him a warm welcome back to Wichita. And Brad, thank you for what you're going to tell us this afternoon.
Well, good afternoon. We knew when we scheduled this that this would be the warm-up act for Game 7 of the World Series. So certainly looking forward to that. And I will tell you that we're not going to get between you and the first pitch. In fact, over the next 35 minutes or so, what we're going to do is talk about all sorts of changes that are going on around the world, around the country, and then I'm going to bring it home to Wichita. And how can we capitalize on these different changes that are happening in different trends? And you'll find that most of these trends are really benefiting downtowns. So if you are passionate about your city, if you have an interest, probably TV people probably don't want that there. If you are passionate about your city, if you have an interest in the future of downtown, you're certainly going to enjoy some of the material that we have for you here. So let's start with going back a slide here. Can we go back? Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to start here. Before we talk about the future, I'm going to talk about the past. And I'm from Denver, and this is my hometown. This is my city. This is Denver, Colorado. This is when I grew up in Denver. So in the 1960s in Denver, this is how we approached downtown development. We actually blew up 20 blocks of my city back in the 60s and the 70s. Urban renewal. We didn't know what to do with downtown. We didn't know what to do with cities. So the way to deal with that was to clear it. And by the time I was in junior high school in Denver, this was the only building remaining, this tower. In fact, if you go back to Denver today, you can still see that tower that's in the middle of the screen. And around that building was a fence, and in the building were dogs. And what we do, our rite of passage was to get past the fence, past the dog, and what you would do is you could bribe the dog pretty easily, and then climb to the top of the tower. And that was our rite of passage growing up in Denver. So in terms of what came next, this is what came next. We destroyed 20 blocks of older 19th century buildings, and we started building these large towers, these large buildings. And that's because that's all we knew what to do with the downtown in the 70s. That's all the market really could support, were these high-rise office buildings. So by the time I was ready to leave Denver, and this is late 70s, you can see that tower is in the center of the screen. And we were largely successful. Denver's viewed as successful with urban renewal. But you can see we've replaced all these old buildings, these 20 blocks, with these large towers and started to reconstruct our city that way. I also want to mention that I have some familiarity with Wichita, not just working here 10, 12 years ago on your downtown, but also I've had family here. So I had the pleasure of visiting Wichita about every 10 years or so. And granted, as a kid, some of my memories, in fact, my memory of Wichita in the 60s was in the basement of my relative's house while the sirens were going on outside. But I have memories of Wichita, and I've had the pleasure of watching your city evolve over the last 50 years. So we're going to fast forward. We're going to fast forward from that Denver scene and from the history of Wichita, fast forward to 2006. And this is where this whole global trends analysis that I'm going to talk about today, this is the genesis of that. And our role with Denver in 2006, we are economists. We're real estate economists and planners. We were part of a team looking at the future of our city. So downtown Denver was embarking on a 20-year vision plan for the future of Denver. And our role was to project 20 years ahead. What would downtown Denver look like 20 years in the future? And if you hire economists to do this kind of stuff, oftentimes what we'll do is we'll look in the past and we'll try to put together some trends based on that. Usually it doesn't work. You can't really project the future from the past. So in the case of the downtown plan in Denver, what we did is we looked at trends that are shaping American cities. We selected 10 of them, researched them, and then brought that back to our city, and it influenced the shape of our plan. We then found that this worked not only in Denver, but it worked in our work throughout the country. So we've had the pleasure of working in cities throughout the United States, 35 states, more than 150 cities. And this trends analysis started to resonate in a whole variety of places. So whether we were in Seattle, or we were in Springfield, Missouri, or if we were any place in between, we found that these trends made sense. So we updated them again in 2011 to look at the impact of the recession. And then earlier this year, we updated them again, and I've been meeting with many of you earlier today, and one of the things I've mentioned, I'm now old enough where I can teach. So I teach a class at the University of Colorado. We teach an economics class in the planning school there. So we put our class to work on the latest iteration of trends. So the information I'm sharing with you today is not only fresh, but it's the result of 22 grad students really researching a whole variety of things that are going on throughout the planet. So I'm going to go into some detail, about a minute on each of these trends, and I'm going to talk about different trends that are shaping cities. And we're going to talk about different demographic trends, and we look at generations that are shaping downtowns. We're going to look at the importance of education and talent now in shaping cities, the influence of women. We're also going to talk about lifestyles that are shaping cities, so changing consumer behaviors, shifts in transportation, health and wellness, something we call regionalism, which is very pertinent to Wichita these days. And then we're also going to look at what's going on the other side of the globe, what's going on in China, India. How does that affect us in downtown Wichita? Technology, what's next? How is that shaping cities? And also sustainability, and there are different facets of sustainability. If you're a trends geek and you're really interested in this stuff, this information is available through the Downtown Development Corporation. We'll make this presentation available through the website as a download. Also, as you can see on the slide, we've changed this up over time. So the trends I'm going to talk about today, about 5 of them, about half of them are the same that we researched about 7 years ago. This has changed somewhat. It's very fluid. The world's changing very quickly. So we'll start with demographics, and there's some audience participation going on here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the 3 generations that are shaping cities. And I'm going to start with the baby boomers. How many in this room will admit, along with me, that you are over 50? So are we all being honest with ourselves here? Okay. So about a third of the crowd. And in terms of the baby boomers, we've heard a lot about baby boomers. The largest generation up until the millennials, which we'll talk about in a moment. Our sheer numbers supported consumption through the pre-recession era, at least for 30, 40 years. Just our sheer numbers shaped America for decades. College education rates rose. We're healthier. We're living longer. In fact, we're all kind of vain enough to think we're all going to end up like these guys right here on the slide, you know. Healthy, on a beach, in love, you know, that's sort of how it all ends. So anyway, we are the generation, though, that was affected most by the recession. So boomers were affected most by the recession. We were hit with both reduction in home equity, also retirement investments got hit hard in the recession. What it means, a lot more of us are aging in place. That's an opportunity for downtown Wichita, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Next, okay, how many in the room will admit to being between 35 and 50? 35 and 50. Okay, so roughly maybe a quarter, a little bit less of those folks. Or again, are we being honest with ourselves here? So you are Gen X, and you are slackers, right? Bitter to what the boomers tried to do for you. Those are some of the early psychographics on Gen X, but really Gen X has matured, has come of age. Most of you have families. This is where the disposable income is coming out of the recession, is with this generation. Also, very importantly, this is the generation that's now taking control, that's taking leadership positions in many cities. So as boomers start to age and as we start to retire, you're seeing more and more Gen X folks pop into leadership positions into cities and civic organizations. All right, next. Millennials, 20 to 35. How many of you? Okay, wow, good job. Good job, Jeff, getting the millennials in the room. That's good. So about a third of you, again, if you're being honest, are millennials. And millennials, we've heard a lot about millennials. So our only hope, right, moving forward. So why are millennials so important? I have millennial kids. I got kids 21 and 23, and I kind of look at them and I wonder, how are you going to save, the world, you guys? But seriously, there's some serious differences here in millennials. Back to the slide. More optimistic, tolerant, open-minded group. These are true multitaskers, so they grew up with technology in the crib. Boomers, we adopted technology in the workplace. It just doesn't have the same connection as it does with the younger demographic. What this means today is they're very well equipped for the jobs that are coming on the market. So the new jobs that are being created, they require those skills, they require the multitasking, they require the technology. Also, multicultural, big demographic shift going on in American cities. So if you look at the 100 largest cities in the United States, from 2000 to 2010, from 43 to 58 went to majority-minority in their racial composition. So big shift going on in our cities right now. And then also, we're going to introduce you to Gen Z. So this is new, and I don't think we have Gen Zs in the room, so I won't even ask the question. But this is the generation behind the millennials. These are folks who are now topping out at about 18 years old. Another big, big generation, just like the millennials. Interestingly, their values, their preferences, very similar to millennials. Where they differ is they're a little more realistic, a little more cautious. They've been affected by more turmoil in the world. So 9/11, our news cycle, school shootings, those kinds of things have made them more cautious. And how that pans out in their preferences as they grow is yet to be determined. Gen Z, though, is ushering in the most dramatic demographic shift in American history. By 2018, children under 18 will be majority minority, and the entire country, by 2042, there will be no ethnic majority in America. All right, let's switch gears. Still talking about demographics. And I'm going to talk about education, talent, and jobs. And this is a game changer in economic development, how cities thrive, how they create jobs. The old model is we would go out and we would talk to CEOs of companies. We target large firms, we talk to CEOs, and we try to convince those CEOs to move to a city. The new model is companies are moving where young talent is. There's a limited supply of these millennials, these 20 to 35-year-old millennials with those skills that match up well with the jobs that are being created, particularly post-recession right now. So back to the slide. So what's happening is we are potentially looking at worker shortages here within the next few years because we have a skills gap. The jobs that are being created don't necessarily match up well with the folks who are still in the labor force. But those who are young, the young skilled workers, 20 to 35, they are highly sought after, and they best fit this. So the third bullet there, this is the key factoid. If you're looking for one thought coming out of this presentation today, and to answer that question I threw out earlier, why are these millennials so important? Well, today, the millennials comprise 36% of the American workforce. By 2020, just in a few years, millennials are going to comprise 50% of the American workforce. What that means is just by sheer numbers, if your city wants to remain competitive and relevant in the national economy, you've got to be recruiting, keeping, bringing back people in this 20 to 35 age demographic. And as you can see from some of these other trends I'm going to talk about, they're wired differently than boomers and Gen X. They just have different preferences. So we'll go on to the next one, the next demographic trend we've looked at. And we've looked at this off and on over the last 6-7 years. But the influence of women in shaping cities and shaping downtowns. Women now are taking almost 60% of all advanced degrees coming out of American colleges. So almost 60% of bachelor's degrees, 60% of master's degrees. What that means is if we're going to fill these office buildings in downtown Wichita, if we're going to continue to fill these office buildings in the future, it's going to be more and more reliant with professional women moving into these buildings. So do we have a downtown that relates, good, we're getting better, that relates to, to how women feel comfortable in downtown? And, this will shock some of you in the audience. Women actually have different preferences, lifestyles, different choices than men, right? So, yeah. So the key question here for you and for Wichita, actually for every city we visit, is do we have women in positions to shape the future of downtown? Do we have women in positions to shape the future of how this city will look like? Typically not. 17% of mayors, 15% of architects, 37% of planners are female. So one of our messages is to make sure that we've got women in positions to influence how the city is going to be. Another trend actually that popped out, and this is the beauty of having 22 researchers, because you just don't know what sort of new information you're going to find. We found another phenomenon here under the influence of women. Single boomer women becoming a power in the economy. This is women over 50. And either outliving their husbands or shedding their husbands through other processes. Single boomer women are really emerging as an economic power. Where you're seeing this is in the home buyer market. They're actually a very viable segment of the home buyer market. I would suggest also a segment that we should be looking at for downtown as well. Right, we're going to switch gears, and now we're going to talk not about demographics, we're going to talk about lifestyles and lifestyle trends that are shaping cities. So I'm going to start with changing consumer behaviors. The recession really was a game changer in how we spend money and how we buy things. So prior to the recession, the boomers, spending money like crazy, right? And that's one of the reasons we had a recession. But the boomers spent money for decades, and we were conspicuous consumption, impulse buying, not so much Gen X and millennials. They're much more deliberate in how they spend money. So impulse spending really being replaced more by deliberate spending. And what that means is that the whole face of retail is changing. Gen X, millennials, really driving the recovery and driving sales. So in terms of merchandising and who we're selling to, the products we're putting together, the preferences, really much more oriented to those generations. And you're seeing national companies are actually responding to this. So on the slide, I don't know if you can see the image on the slide, but this is actually in Minneapolis where Target has a 20,000 square foot footprint for a store, for an urban store. They're going as small as 7,000 square feet in urban areas, responding to this trend of different groups moving back into the city. Another significant trend that's shaping cities is shifts in transportation and mobility. And when we first did this 7 years ago, we were focused on congestion. In the larger cities in America, people spend a lot of time going nowhere on a freeway. In fact, the average time that people go nowhere in a major American city is 39 hours a year. They're sitting in traffic going nowhere. Wichita, you don't have quite that kind of problem. Congestion, not a big issue here. However, the bigger issue now is demographics. Transportation preferences are being affected yet again by those millennials, that 20 to 35 age demographic. The third bullet on here, pretty critical. People in their 20s accounted for 21% of all driving miles back in the 90s. Today, people in their 20s account for 14% of all driving miles. What that means is people in their 20s are looking for other ways to get around. So they want a place to be bikeable. They want it to be walkable. If we've got transit, they want transit options that make sense for them. And interestingly, bike share. You'll see bike share in cities that you travel to, those bikes in the corrals that you can take point to point. You can rent them for short term. Bike share is the fastest growing mode of transportation ever on planet Earth. Bike share is the fastest growing mode of transportation ever on the planet. It was in 500 cities when we completed the research earlier this year. Today, more than 600 cities around the globe have this, responding to this demographic change that's happening not only in the United States, but throughout the world. Next trend, health and wellness. And healthy places emerging as a trend. And this may be something that Wichita could be uniquely positioned to take advantage of. Both boomers and millennials really interested in active living. So for millennials, this is just part of their DNA. They like to walk, they like to bike, they like to be active. Boomers, we want to live longer. So we're starting to realize that we have to be more active. So can we incorporate active living into the downtown environment? Also, healthy food movements. Very serious movement going on in this country. And here you are in Wichita, just surrounded by miles and miles and miles of agricultural abundance. So can we bring that, can we showcase that in some way through our downtown? Seventh trend we look at, and this is a political trend. So that always causes a stir when we talk a little bit about politics. But when we first looked at this 7 years ago, we were focused on the national debt, and that's what we called this. We thought the debt burden was going to create maybe some problems in our future. At that time, back in 2000, everyone in this room, everyone in your family accounted for $29,000 of the national debt. Last week, when I checked, you can actually Google per capita national debt, United States. If you really want to get depressed, every week you can check the national debt clock. Last week, the national debt, more than $56,000 for every person, everyone in your family. What this means is the federal government's broke. Forget dysfunctional. Forget who's going to be in power. The federal government is broke, dysfunctional. It's not going to be able to invest in what we've relied in relied for it to invest in the past. So in the past, we relied on the feds and the state to invest in infrastructure, in innovation, and education. Without that ability, our message is it's really now up to cities and regions to invest in themselves. And what we really see happening in the future is we see a set of cities in this country that are going to have that courage, that are going to invest in their own infrastructure, their own innovation, and they'll stay connected and relevant to the national and the world economy. Those that don't choose that course, well, not so much. Let's move on. Last set of trends, global competition. So how is what's going on around the world, how does that affect us here in Wichita? This exhibit, I love this exhibit since we put this one together. These are the world's largest economies over a 200-year span. So if you go back to 1850, back to the 19th century, the two largest economies on the planet, China and India. If you look at this year, the United States, of course, the global powerhouse. China just popped over Japan here in the last 5 years or so. And if you look ahead to 2050, there's China and India again. So what's going on is there's a big shift in wealth that's going on around the world right now. And what the recession did is accelerated that shift in wealth. So the amount of consumption in some of these countries around the world is really quite astounding. Second bullet on the slide. If you look at China, you look at car sales in China. In 2000, China accounted for less than 1% of global car sales. Last year, more than 24% of global car sales in China. The comparable data for the United States, we were 34% of global car sales in 2000. Last year, 19% of global car sales. So what this means in this shift of wealth, this means because of the consumption in other parts of the globe, the commodities that we rely on for growth, concrete, steel, petroleum, there's going to continue to be pressure on the pricing of that. That's going to make all of this out here far more economically attractive. If we can reuse existing infrastructure, if we can reuse a building like this one, economic advantages moving forward, and more so as time goes on, because of not what's going on in our country, but what's going on in the rest of the world. Next, the ninth trend we looked at, technology. What's next? The big game changer in shaping cities and shaping how we work, shaping how we live to a degree, are really mobile connections, smartphones. And it's actually hard for me to believe that when we first did this trends analysis back in 2007, that's when the iPhone was introduced. There was no iPhone before 2007. Next year, there will be more mobile connections on this planet than there are people. There will be more mobile connections than there are people. We're doing a better job getting cell phones and cell technology into people's hands than we are feeding them on this planet right now. So what that means is it's really altering the economy. It's altering how we create jobs. And where the action is really in innovation, entrepreneurship, small business development. It's also altering the design of what we build. So if you look at new office development or even residential development, you're seeing the individual spaces are getting smaller, the social communal spaces are getting larger, and that's a big factor of technology and accommodating the way technology connects us all. That also applies to a downtown and how we design space within a downtown. Okay, last trend, then I'm going to bring it all together and bring it home for Wichita. Sustainability. So the last trend, we've looked at sustainability throughout the time we've been doing this, and sustainability, there's three pillars to sustainability. How do we live in balance with the earth? That's ecological. Economic sustainability. How do we remain relevant, connected, part of the global economy? And then there's something called social equity. Are we creating a world where everyone shares in this and everybody has access into the economy and into prosperity? And this one actually popped out at us this go-around. The notion of social equity, the notion that income inequality in the United States is now at its greatest since the 1920s. And in and of itself, that doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily slow growth, but it does mean access and mobility is changing. So part of our message here is for downtowns and business communities, One, to be ready for this issue. This is going to come up in a variety of places. It's eventually going to pop up in Wichita. Also, diversification of downtown, diversifying price points of housing, diversifying the offerings that we have down here so that we continue to embrace everyone within our community moving forward. That really is a central role of a downtown. So, conclusions. All this information, all these trends, there's 150 different sources, all sorts of research. Really, to us, it boils down to 5 big conclusions. All these conclusions are favorable to vibrant downtowns. And vibrant is in there for a reason. Not every downtown is going to benefit. But if you have some vitality, if you got some action, if you got some mojo going on, we think you're going to benefit from this. So, why so favorable? One, demographics. Demographics are in the favor of downtown. The United States getting both older and younger. So boomers, millennials, there's more of them. They're more predisposed to downtowns and to the type of living and working environment that we have down here. 2, increasingly connected and competitive world. If we can foster innovation and entrepreneurship in downtown, that's going to be a competitive advantage, not just for downtown Wichita, but that's going to start to be a competitive advantage for your whole city and your whole region. 3, resource-intensive lifestyle is not sustainable. That's that resource use by other countries around the planet and the desirability of reusing existing infrastructure, existing buildings. 4, innovation and investment more reliant on regional initiative. That's that dysfunctional federal and state government and how cities and regions increasingly are going to have to invest in themselves if they're going to prosper moving forward. And then lastly, planning for economic diversity, really an emerging priority and something to consider as you look at downtown and downtown's future. Are we really creating a downtown where everybody is going to be welcome and there's going to be accessibility for all sorts of folks in your community? So, last set of slides are some recommendations for Wichita. How can we actually apply these trends, capitalize on them, and really improve not only our downtown, but our whole city and our community? So on demographics, capture that young skilled workforce. We've got to get that 20 to 35 group here. So, some of our kids, they're going to move away. They're going to go to, San Francisco or Denver or, wherever. But how do we get them back? Or how do we keep that young skilled talent here? We want to be welcoming. We want to provide information. We want to make it easy to move back here, find a job. Embrace tolerance and be multicultural. That's clearly where this country is moving toward. And then also, the third check mark here on this slide is interesting. When you have a group of 22 grad students doing research for you, you come up with some pretty creative incentives. So they talked about, hey, how about writing down student debt? That's actually one of the big crises now, is this generation of college graduates have the most college debt ever. Well, perhaps communities could help them write down that debt as an incentive to get them to move to your community. Create an environment that appeals to women. Do we have a mixed-use atmosphere? Do we have relevant services for those lifestyles? Do we have women in positions of leadership to shape how downtown is going to be evolving? Also in demographics, education's important. We may do a great job and get millennials down here, but these millennials have a way of sort of pairing up, and then suddenly they have kids, and then, whoa, do we have the right amenity base downtown? So schools become important, parks and other amenities like that. Housing with diverse price points. You're fortunate in Wichita, and I really think that's one of your differential advantages for this city moving forward. You really are an affordable alternative with some of the city amenities that are offered in some of these markets of even like my home city, Denver. I think there's a saturation point of how many people, how many millennials can afford, a 1,000 square foot apartment at $2,500 a month. So a place like Wichita, if we can afford some of the same amenities, you have a great cost competitive advantage moving forward. Lifestyles. Are we promoting a whole variety of mobility options? Are we designing our streets beyond just cars? Can our streets be more walkable? Can we accommodate bikes? I think it's St. Francis, that street, that has sort of caught my eye in returning here. You were courageous, you went from one-way to two-way, and it's working. It's actually working for you. Hey, There are a lot of cities out there without that courage. So, this is an aside. This town needs to celebrate its victories. It really does. And we can talk more about that in Q&A. But, I mean, St. Francis is a great example of what your streets can be and how that can also be economically productive and desirable in the process. Promote the sharing economy. The notion of bike share. Would that work? Is that sort of now essential infrastructure if we're trying to get 20 to 35-year-olds here? Some people will say, bike in Wichita? Are you kidding? Have you been here in the summer, buddy, and seen what it's like here? Well, the number 2 bicycle commuting city in the United States is Minneapolis. Yeah, not a great environment there, particularly come January, February. But that's the number after Portland. Portland you would expect because that attracts certain type of folks, right? But I hope no one's from Portland in here. But, it rains in Portland. So you got rainy Portland, number 1 bike commuting city. You've got snowy Minneapolis, number 2 bike commuting city. Don't underestimate how Wichita could become sort of a healthier, active, bikeable city. Other suggestions on lifestyles. These healthy places and food movements. Can we plan our public realm for more activity? Also, again, being in the middle of this agricultural breadbasket, how can we celebrate that heritage? How can we bring more of this local food and celebrate that within the downtown? Keep it fun. You're actually doing a pretty darn good job on keeping it fun. It's a lot more fun than when I was here 10, 12 years ago, I'll tell you that. So, how do we continue to bring restaurants and entertainment and different things to do downtown? And advocate for regional investment. I know you've got a vote next week, and regardless of which way that goes, there's going to be a need to continue to look at what does this region need to be competitive, and what sort of infrastructure, what sort of investment do you need to make. And like my city, you're going to need to be vigilant, and it's going to take time. Not going to solve all these things at once or even through one election. Lastly, global competition. How do we stay competitive? Can we promote entrepreneurship? What is our role as Wichita in this innovation economy? You can't innovate here. You've got the raw materials here presently. So you don't have to be Silicon Valley, but we've got Wichita State, my understanding is they produce a lot of engineers. You've got a manufacturing heritage in this city. We've got this agricultural context. There's got to be a formula there where this becomes a hotbed for innovation with the ingredients that you already have. I guess I would challenge the community to really look at that. I think there's some time sensitivity and some urgency because you want to be known for innovation and for fostering entrepreneurship. But I also think you have the raw materials, you have the ingredients. You're not going to have to reinvent yourself necessarily. Public-private financing tools, more complex, and we need to be more cognizant that the private sector is really going to lead more in the future in terms of public-private partnerships. And then, lastly, on some of these implications, adaptive reuse, we talked about that. Sustainability, really owning that as part of the downtown brand. This is the part of town where you can have the most sustainable lifestyle. And for people my age, that might sound kind of cliche, but for all those millennials who raise their hand and who we want to get into town, that's an important value. Being in balance with the earth, very important value for them. So downtown can be that place in Wichita where you have that balance. So, in conclusion, and this really is the bottom line of this whole presentation, never in anybody's lifetime in here, never in our lifetimes have so many converging trends and market conditions supported downtown. This is really a rare opportunity. Never in our lifetimes have all these trends converged to support downtown development. And in fact, if you go back to downtown, that's downtown Denver. And there's that tower that I had to get past the guard dogs. Remember that story in the beginning, getting past the fence, the guard dogs? That tower is right in the center of that. And who knew? We didn't know. I didn't know when I was 14 years old, sneaking in there, nor when I was working even in my own city in downtown development 30 years ago. So that is not just my city, but it really can be Wichita's story as well. So with that, my understanding is we have time for questions. Is that correct?
the room, Jason and Jamie will have mics. Jamie's over here to my left, and I don't think Jason's over here to my right. So just raise your hand and let one of them get to you, and then we can ask the question so everyone can hear it, and Brad would be more than happy to try to answer those questions. So, first question.
Was that a rhetorical statement or a question? The question for the tape was that because of their interest in social activism and their spirit of volunteerism, if one is going to change the community, doesn't it not make sense to enlist and get millennials passionate about these types of things as well as females in the communities? Well, the answer is it's going to happen whether you get them excited or not. There is a rising tide of civic activism that you're seeing across the United States, and I think millennials are finding, particularly as they age, they're finding additional ways to be involved in change. But yeah, your comment, I think, is on point, that if you're going to foster change in Wichita, if you're going to revitalize downtown Wichita, the doors need to be open to people 20 to 35 to help them into leadership positions and help nurture them into leadership positions so that they can be part of the change. They're your future. I mean, myself, my age, I mean, we're checking out of here in, a couple decades. So let's, hopefully a little more, but so let's go with the people who are going to inherit all this and really have most at stake. And yes, you want to get that young blood involved in downtown improvement and in city improvement, absolutely. I think we do want you to speak into the microphone for the video. Yeah.
In your experience looking at other downtowns, how important was it to have a grocery store?
Ha-ha. Grocery store. Grocery store is one of those top amenities, particularly if you want to live downtown. So I'm assuming we want to foster more people living down here, and it's one of those key amenities. There are a number of key amenities that are important for folks living downtown. Grocery stores on the list. Dog park. You currently have, I think, about 1,700 people living in the core of downtown. I'd wager you probably have 930 dogs if you got 1,700 people. So there's a whole list of amenities that are crucial. On the grocery store, this would be my suggestion. Yes, you want a grocery store. Forget about a big chain. Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, sorry, they're going to be looking at formulas. They're not going to be the pioneers in a market like this. But where you're going to find groceries is from a local independent, a local entrepreneur. I think the door's wide open there. I think a smaller floor plate can work. Prepared foods are where there's some margin in because grocery is a really tough business in terms of margin. But if there's prepared foods, and usually people living downtown will buy prepared foods. Also, fresh food. Fresh food is a great angle if someone wants to do a downtown grocery. So yes, that's one of those key amenities. You want it, but I would look locally and within the community for someone to take that risk and open it up.
So for posterity via the taping and the Twitters, why do you think Wichita needs to celebrate its victories?
Wow. Why does, yeah, because I did say I'd talk about that later. And again, I'm speaking out of school. Jeff said I could speak out of school, and I can speak out of school because tomorrow I get on a plane, so, it doesn't really matter. A key to economic development of any community is psychology. Key to economic development is psychology. And communities that believe in themselves and that have confidence in themselves and embrace their core values, their core qualities of their history and what they are, they tend to succeed better. And I see a Wichita today that's sort of doubting itself. You're going through a tough time. We've lost jobs. We're sort of trying to figure out a new course moving forward. But I think it's as simple as starting to believe in Wichita can really have some swagger and some confidence moving forward. So, yeah, celebrate your victories. We converted St. Francis. It was controversial. It's really worked well. We're going to celebrate that thing. And you know, we've made this city a lot better than it was. And I think that's how cities start to turn around. When I look at my own city, when I look at Denver, and I can say this because I'm from Denver, Denver in the 80s was a dump. I mean, it was a dump. It was total. Our downtown was one big empty office park. That's all it was. It was nothing more than that. And we started rebuilding our city through small incremental change, through embracing entrepreneurs, organic incremental development, piece by piece, and celebrating a lot of small victories. And those start to snowball. They start to snowball and they start to build on themselves. So I don't think it's unique to Wichita, but I think any market in the United States right now that's been struggling a little bit, part of this, again, is going back to the essence of what you are. How do we take that, create a competitive advantage, and when we do have victories, celebrate them, no matter how small they may be. There's a hand in the back.
Hi there. So I sit on the board for Bike Walk Wichita, and we've been advocating for active transportation in the city for a couple of years. So I'm really excited to hear you talk about a bike share program and how that can help. My question to you is whether or not you have anything to say for public transit and mass transportation, both within the city and connecting the city within other parts of the region.
Big question. First of all, let me premise this by saying cars will continue to be king in a place like Wichita, certainly for the next, into the future. So we can't fool ourselves that cars are going to go away anytime soon. So cars are going to continue to be the dominant form of transportation here. However, to me, the issue is choice, is providing quality choice to people so they're not just dependent on their car. So yes, we talked about bikes, we talked about walkability, and transit. And my suggestion here is to start looking at all of those, bikes, walkability, transit, as economic development drivers. So when you talk about connecting the community with transit and connecting other communities with transit, part of that is going to be looking at transit in a different way. That transit is not just sort of its traditional role, maybe, in getting workers to jobs, but transit really is something that's going to be attractive, again, to that younger generation in a variety of different incomes and lifestyles. So I guess my answer to your question is I don't know enough about the specifics of transit in this region. I do know, though, that if you want people 20 to 35, and if you want skilled people, and if you want people who are moving here, sometimes from larger cities, it's important to provide a transit experience that has quality and is welcoming to folks and that works extremely well. It's one of those choices that a community is going to need to have to remain competitive.
The groups that I interact with, I hear a lot of talk about community gardens, and I'm just wondering if community gardens have been a part of these cities that have revitalized their downtowns.
Community gardens, a total home run. Total home run. Community gardens are great. The biggest impediment to community gardens right now is zoning, land use regulations. So community gardens, they're a home run for a number of reasons. One, they're relatively inexpensive, and you can do them in a lot of different places. Two, they are community building. People like doing it. People like having that plot. It's definitely a trend that we're seeing in cities throughout the country. And three, I can't think of a better place to try to do that than Wichita. I mean, again, that should be part of the heritage here, the notion of a connection to the food and growing and all of that. So, yeah, community gardens are a great concept to the extent you can make it easy to do it here as opposed to difficult. I think you'll see more of them.
Well, you can see why it's such a pleasure to know Brad, because it's a lot of fun to know him, because you learn something new every time you interface with him, and so it's somebody that we certainly gravitate toward when we get to see him from time to time. So, a couple of things that was really important, I think, to hear. One is that the millennials today are about 36% of the workforce. In a few years, they're 50%. So millennials, you're taking over the world here in a few years. So be gentle with us, baby boomers. We try to create a good place for you. The other thing I love is that baby boomer women are shedding their husbands. I love that. In fact, Brad, I use that a lot in our presentations. I think that's, and we also know from Brad and James that women are smarter than men. So, both of them have told us that. The other thing is that the trends are favorable for our downtowns, not only just for Wichita, but across the United States. And I think it's important that we take that opportunity and we maximize it. I think we, every day, get up, how do we do that for Wichita? How do we make it even a better place? And I think part of it is, let's create and own our swag. Let's get it and let's hold on to it and promote it, be proud of it, because this is a great city. I moved here 6 years ago with my family. Never looked back. This is a great place. The brightest days are yet to come. So let's celebrate it and let's move forward and do that. The other thing is to celebrate some of our distinctiveness. And you have that as a 10% coupon on your seats. That is Espresso to Go-Go has opened up their second location in this building. Please go by and use this. It's great. Go by and see the Flying Unicorn. Again, I don't think you see it in every city. So, Brad, don't take it to Denver. We've got it first. And so, but again, go down there and enjoy that. The location here or also over at Douglas and St. Francis. Speaking of someone who is she's going to actually wrap us up this evening, but Shelley Pritchard is an individual that is working, she's the CEO of the Community Foundation. And you talk about someone who's making a difference. Shelley is doing that. And if you don't know her, take the opportunity to know her, because part of what she does is build legacies for our community. And so again, Shelley has been a huge part of the driving force of having this series. I'm fortunate to be actually on her board, but it's a pleasure just to interface with her because she is creative and she's driving how do we continue to build our community. And one of the things she's going to talk to you about is actually right after this at 6:30, but I'm going to let Shelley talk to you about that. So give a warm applause to Shelley. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. That's a pretty big buildup. Okay, who in the room has a big idea for Wichita? There better be a whole lot of hands going up after this series, that's for sure. I see a lot of them. That's awesome. Well, we're trying to do something to help some of those ideas become realities. On most of your chairs, we didn't have quite enough cards. We're very fortunate to be a city that's supported by the Knight Foundation. They used to own the newspaper here, and they're active in the 26 cities where they owned newspapers. They have committed $5 million to help us and the 25 other cities find a way to improve where we live, our community, and what we do. So I'm going to read you their specific words. Knight invests in civic innovators using place to accelerate talent, opportunity, and engagement. So civic innovators using place to accelerate talent, opportunity, and engagement. They have a contest. It started a month ago. It runs for 2 more weeks. It's over on November 14th at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central. And we want to talk more about that, and we want to get your ideas. So immediately following this, we're all going to walk over to River City Brewery, go upstairs to Loft 150, because it's just not that far. We can all walk over there. We have such a walkable city. We have snacks there for you. You can buy a beer. There is going to be a TV, so you can watch the Royals. And we have George Abbott, who's here from the Knight Foundation in Miami. He's already over there setting up and getting ready. But you are all invited. We hope that you'll come. Learn a little bit about George. He's not going to tell you what the secrets are. The only thing you have to do to apply to possibly get some of this $5 million is tell them what's your idea. They give you 150 words. What do you want to learn? You have another 150 words. And then you capture the essence of what that's going to do for Wichita in a tweet. So that's 140 characters. So it doesn't take much time. So get that idea succinct. Fill out the application online. Then they're going to do a round 2. So last week I was at a conference actually with George. They had 962 ideas a week ago today, and they hope to get thousands more. And it truly is going to help Wichita get their attention the more we have. So Todd Ramsey, I know, is going to submit an idea a day for the whole 6 weeks. So we know that we've got that many. But it may be the craziest idea you could ever have. And don't worry about if you can't pull it off, because that's what the Community Foundation is going to do. If it's an idea that's selected by night for the second round for further development and funding, we're going to bring you together with people who can make that happen. So obviously we're a little bit excited about this. We hope you'll join us later tonight. And now finally I'm going to introduce John Rolfe, because we really have your whole evening planned. You're here, then you're going to go to Loft 150, have some snacks, and talk to George and talk about this competition. Then you're going to go to Carlos O'Kelly's, get 29-cent queso, watch the game there, or take it home. So John's going to give us just a brief update on Yes Wichita.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here. She forgot to mention that we have $2 margaritas tonight as well. So go Royals, something we can all agree on. Now, just a quick update on the Yes Wichita campaign and the sales tax referendum. It's interesting. I really appreciate this series, The Fuel the Fire. It started with a message about needing to get moving, needing to improve this community and be attractive to young people. Then James Chung came in as the second speaker and talked about, from a demographic perspective, we are at a crossroads as a city, innovate or stagnate. And then we hear tonight that the cities of the future make the choice to invest in themselves. And I just want to tell you, this has been a fascinating campaign. I'm so grateful to be involved in it. I'm a 35-year-old, so I fit in that category of people thinking about the future of this community and wanting to be a part of it. So grateful to be a part of this campaign. But at the very beginning, the first week that I got in this campaign, someone associated with the group that's funding the no side of this said, "Hey, I got to tell you, I appreciate what you're doing, but we're going to squash you like a bug." All right? And that's exactly what they've tried to do. We'll end up spending close to $100,000 on TV. They'll spend close to $750,000 to $1 million on TV. We've sent out 4 mailers. They'll send out 12 mailers over the next 2 weeks. They're all over the radio. We'll buy a full-page ad in Sunday Eagle. They'll be in the Eagle with a full-page ad every day this week, plus a freestanding insert on Sunday. Now, let's talk about the kind of city that we believe in. I don't think you're supposed to talk about internal polling, but let me tell you what we're seeing. We started this thing up by double digits the day it went on the ballot. 3 weeks ago, when we had spent no money, the other side spent a bunch of money, we were down 4 points. As of this week, we're talking to 3,000 voters a day, and we show ourselves up 2 points. Okay? That means that we've moved this thing 6 points and momentum's on our side. But the thing you need to know is there's still 10% undecided in our community that are going to vote. And that will determine this election. Now, I want you to think about the community that you believe in. I want to tell you about the kind of community I believe in. First, I believe in our democracy, that the voice of the people can't be drowned out by the shouting of a few. I believe in a community that I've seen come around this issue, where I've seen the unions and chamber come around the table. I've seen low income and I've seen high income come around the table. I've seen East Siders and I've seen West Siders. I've seen this community come together in ways that I've never seen before, and I grew up here. Because I think we see that this decision is more about the infrastructure decisions that are on it. It's more than our water. It's more than about our streets. This is a symbol of what we believe in ourselves, and it sends a strong signal to people my age. Are we going to believe in ourselves? Are we going to come together and invest in ourselves? It sends a statement to the businesses that are here and the businesses that are looking at this community. Do we believe we're worth investing in? Because if we don't believe it, they won't believe it either. My friends, these next 6 days are one of the most important moments of the next decade for this community. I ask you to believe in this community. I've seen this community come together. One of my earliest memories, my dad was one of the owners of the Wichita Wings, was the first Save the Wings campaign. All right? We pulled that one off, right? And if you like an underdog stories, follow this Royal story. It's a lot like ours. But let me just say this. I'd ask that you, not the people voting against us, don't do this, but the people voting for it, reach out to 5 people over the next 2 days and let them know that you're supporting this. The strength of this deal is the grassroots. It's the 20 organizations that have endorsed this. It's the over 500 people the last 3 days that have publicly stuck their name on this campaign. Please get out there and spread the word. Let this be the moment that 5 years from now we don't look back and say, look at that opportunity that we missed. Let us look back on this moment 5 years from now and say, look at what we started on November 4th, 2014. Please join me and vote yes and spread the word. And thank you guys, and thank you for Fuel the Fire.
I'm so happy I'm an American. Thank you, John. And thank you to Brad. I was going to say he was the finale, but actually I think he's the initiation and the beginning of what's a lot of great things to come in Wichita. So the Community Foundation has had just a tremendous pleasure in working with Jeff and his team, and Susie and Gary and the Chamber of Commerce. It's been a lot of hard work, but it's been absolutely worth it. We're getting phone calls and emails about what's next. So now I want to say we started this, you guys finish it. Let's figure out what's next. Go Wichita, and let's all go down to the brewery. Thank you.